Good morning to you. Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning, good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. I hope that you have been having a great and wonderful week, and I hope that you have been enjoying our week and our focus on Women's History Month. We do have quite a bit to share because we are not only sharing on Women's History Month, but we're also continuing our themes for every single day, which happens to be for Friday, Healthy, Wealthy, Wise, Finance Friday. And some of our information does tie into that from women's history, but also we are continuing some of our regular book readings on top of adding in today. So I wanted to go ahead and share with you what today's giveaway is. And today's giveaway is a framed print of one of my art pieces. It is a framed print of one of my art pieces. In order to participate in today's giveaway, you have to tell me about a place in Africa that you want to visit. In order to participate in today's giveaway, tell me about a place in Africa that you want to visit and why. All right. You can email your answers to reachshantae@gmail.com. Your name will be entered into a drawing to win today's giveaway. Also, our giveaway from Wednesday, Girl CEO, a copy of this book. If you still want to participate in that, this is still available for and up for grabs. All you have to do is tell me about a female entrepreneur that you know. Tell me something about them, submit their information, and I will feature them on my page. All right. So, from Girl CEO, I'm going to read you. One of the girls that's featured in here is Michaela Ulmer. Good morning to everyone. Good morning, Lady Barbara, Prophet Jonathan, Pastor Ben, Lady Evelyn. Good morning to you. All right. Her name is Michaela Ulmer, and her advice today is, which happens to kind of line up with some of the things we're talking about today, you're never too young to start a business. Michaela Ulmer launched her amazing career when she was only 4 years old. Dressed up in a bumblebee suit and a big yellow daisy in her hair, Michaela sold lemonade at a children's business fair in her hometown of Austin, Texas. She made the drink by adding honey to her great grandmother's recipe, which contains flax seeds. Together, the lemonade and Michaela were such a hit that Michaela decided she wanted to sell her lemonade at stores year round, not just a few times a year. So, her mother, a marketing expert, later encouraged her to start her own company. Today, Michaela's Me and the Bees lemonade comes with extra benefits for the environment. The 13-year-old's company uses local ingredients and helps spread the word about threats to the bee population that help her make her money through their honey. Michaela didn't always appreciate bees. Like many kids her age, she's been stung more than once. But in the course of building her business, she herself became interested in bees. She learned how bees help out the environment, and soon she had the makings of a mission. Bees are pollinators. By moving pollen from one plant to another, they help the plants produce new seeds, creating fruit and new plants. Pollinators help about 1/3 of American crops, which, in case you didn't know, bees are being endangered more and more every single year. And so this is actually a very important thing because if they're not pollinating plants, then that means we're losing the ability to have fresh fruit. Yeah. Contributing several billion dollars a year to U.S. agriculture. Yet in recent years, as Michaela learned, honeybees have faced challenges. Excuse me, something feels like something's in my eye. Honeybees have faced challenges including disease, mites, and the increased use of pesticides. Scientists worry that they may die out entirely. Michaela's company's website, which features a picture of her in a beekeeper outfit, notes that Me and the Bees Lemonade contributes to several organizations working to help preserve the future of bees. Buy a bottle, save a bee is its motto. She has also started her own nonprofit, Healthy Hive Foundation, committed to education, protection, and preservation of the bee population. As Michaela has moved from grade school to middle school, she's continued to be her own company's ambassador. She has visited the White House twice, first to have lunch with President Obama and First Lady Michelle, and later to join the White House Easter egg roll, where she served President Obama a glass of her lemonade. I'll be back on the job market in 7 months, Obama joked after meeting her, so I hope she's hiring. In 2015, at the age of 9, Michaela went on the show Shark Tank. Standing next to a lemonade stand, she wore a bright yellow sundress, a teal headband, and a confident smile. She got a sweet deal. I have a sweet deal for you, she told the panel. I created a product that is both good for you and tastes great at the same time. One of the judges, Damon John, was so taken by her performance that he jumped out of his chair to give her a hug. She was and is the face of the brand, the sweetest little thing in the world, he later said. John himself invested 60,000 into the company in return for a 25% share. That was Michaela's big break. Her sales took off and distribution increased from 35 stores in Austin to more than 200 stores throughout the United States. Michaela's picture is on every label. Like many other young entrepreneurs, Michaela has gotten lots of help from her talented family. Her mother, Deandra, founded her own marketing firm, becoming Chief Marketing Bee for Me and the Bees Lemonade in 2014. Her dad, Theo, a financial consultant, also helps out. Michaela spends lots of her time on her business, juggling travel, speaking engagements, and interviews with school, homework, and fun. She enjoys birthday parties and sleepovers as much as any other child. Yet, after nearly a decade at work, she does not seem to be slowing down. I'm going to take it step by step and day by day and see what comes out of it, she said in a recent interview. Michaela's advice for other young entrepreneurs is simple. Dream big, she says. Dream like a kid. So there you have it. She started at 4 years old and she's been working in her company for over a decade now. That's what you call grinding and grace for the grind. So the book is Girl CEO. Again, all you have to do to participate in its giveaway is tell me about an entrepreneur, and you will be entered into the drawing to receive a free copy. This is my copy. All right, let us move on to Urban Intellectual cards. I just have two of them for you today. Again, if you want to order a set or any of the other sets, you can go to urbanintellectuals.com. And there's 4 different volumes of these cards. Plus, they also have a set of Black History flashcards. They have some Black History coloring books as well. So if you're looking for something for younger children, this is the perfect place to enhance the education you are already giving your children, right? I'm going to assume that you're already educating your children on Black history. So I'm not going to, you know, I'm not going to freak out if you say, no, I'm not doing that. But here's a site you can go to, urbanintellectuals with an s.com. All right. This card is Harriet Tubman. Most people know Harriet Tubman, but sometimes they confuse her with Sojourner Truth. Harriet Tubman was born sometime in 1822 and she died March 10th, 1913. She escaped Slavery became an abolitionist and an armed spy during the Civil War. She escaped slavery and began freeing her own family members through a connected network of safe houses called the Underground Railroad. I find it very interesting that a lot of the a lot of the stories you hear about slavery many times is just that one person escaping. But with Harriet, she actually went back several times to rescue her own family members, which is key if you're talking about freedom. She led approximately 300 slaves to freedom in the North during her lifetime, earning her the nickname Moses. She served as a soldier, an American spy, a cook, and a nurse in the Union Army during the Civil War. She continued to work in support of women's equal rights and the right for a woman to vote until her death in 1913. John Brown shared his plans to raid Harper's Ferry with Harriet Tubman. She was buried with military honors in Fort Hill Cemetery in New York. Now, there's a quote that is going around that says, I would have freed, I think, 1,000 more slaves if they knew they were slaves or something like that. And many people attribute that quote to Harriet Tubman, but Harriet Tubman actually never said that. All right. I checked with her family foundation and they said there's no evidence that she actually said that statement. So even though it is a popular statement and even though it is a true statement, that some people don't even know they're slaves, so you can't really free them. She herself never actually said that quote. All right. My next person is another person from history. Her name is Tetu, Tetu, or Tetu Betul. She was, and she lived, born 1851, passed away February 11th, 1918. She was the Empress of Ethiopia and wife of Menelik II, heirs of the Ethiopian throne, descendants of King David. She was educated and spoke more than one language, which was rare for a woman of her time. She was co equal with the emperor, who always consulted her prior to making important decisions for the kingdom. She was a military strategist who persuaded her husband to declare war against Italy at the Battle of Adwa as a way to stand up for liberty against Italian aggression. She bravely commanded both men and women on the battlefield and fought on the front line to bring her country to victory. She governed Ethiopia after the emperor suffered a stroke and was no longer able to rule. Don't hear about her in my history books. Suspect. All right, let's move on to a little bit on health. We're moving right along. And I want to talk about one of my favorite nuts today, the pistachio. Put some hearts on the screen if you are a pistachio fan. All right. Let's learn a little bit about the pistachio. I only have one pistachio fan. This is a travesty. Travesty. Two? Okay, good. Pistachios are known as the smiling nuts. How appropriate. They belong to the same family as the cashew nuts. Pistachios are the much loved green nuts of a small bushy tree. Their distinctive color and sweet taste have brought them fame beyond their native Turkey as a flavoring for ice cream. Now, I don't know, but I've never tried pistachio ice cream before. I just like the nuts. The origins are Middle East and Central Asia. Major producers right now are Iran, the US, and Turkey. They contain 45% fat, and yeah. So let's go. Let's take a look at the origin of pistachios. The ruins of Göbekli Tepe, a 12,000-year-old hilltop site in Anatolia, part of present-day Turkey, revealed that the people who lived and perhaps worshipped there ate pistachios. Pistachio trees are reputed to have grown some 8,000 years later in the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which is present day Iraq. Native to the Middle East and Central Asia, the pistachio tree bears clusters of reddish, wrinkled fruits, similar in appearance to olives. Inside the stone of the fruit nestles the nut or kernel, which is usually green. Pistachios are one of the only two nuts mentioned in the Bible. Yeah. The kernel is further protected by a thin ivory colored shell, which splits open at one end as it ripens in Iran. Pistachios are known as the smiling nut, and they were highly valued as a food by traders traveling along the Silk Road between China and the West. They are thought to have been introduced to Italy from Syria in 1st century BCE. Pistachios were taken to California in the mid 19th century, where they became a common sight in vending machines. Their shells were often dyed red to hide their imperfections and distinguish them from other nuts. I remember when I was a child that they were dyed red. I don't think I've seen any dyed red in the last decade or so, though. They might still be dyeing them. Large scale cultivation. Yeah, they're in the Bible. It's a lot of stuff in the Bible that people don't, they kind of skip over. But yeah, they're in the Bible. Large scale cultivation, however, only started in California in the 1970s. Today, the U.S. is one of the chief producers, along with Iran and Turkey. Pistachios are often used in Middle Eastern pastries or in savory dishes such as pilafs. They are also a popular snack all over the world, as well as being an important ingredient in ice cream. In India, pistachio, barfi, a sweetmeat, and kulfi, Indian ice cream, are favorites among the sweet-toothed. So there you have it, pistachios. All right. My next one, and then we're going to move on to our book, Wealth Can't Wait, and cover pillar number 6 today. Coffee, the drink with a kick. This is a picture of the Ottoman coffee house. After its introduction to the Ottoman Empire in the 16th century, coffee quickly became a favorite at the court of Suleiman the Magnificent, where the post of chief coffee maker was established as a sign of the drink's importance. So I'm going to show you this picture. Um, Very interesting picture here because I see a couple things. I'm going to show you this picture of an Ottoman coffee house in the 16th century. Let's take a look at that. I see a couple of things in there. I see some brothers. I think they're all men though. I wonder if women were allowed in their coffee houses. This picture definitely looks like right. It looks like a 16th century Starbucks, right? It looks like the original man cave. I see one guy over here with some kind of pipe he's got going, and some people are reading, right? Some people are writing. Let me bring that back again so you guys can look a little closer. You see the guys, they got their little intellectual hub going. Anybody see the man with the pipe? He's smoking something right there. All right. This would have been the 16th century man cave. It would have been a coffee house. What does the man cave look like today? Whole other sermon. Coffee, the drink with a kick. Let me stay focused. No one knows for certain how or when coffee was discovered, though legends abound. One of the two main species, Arabica and Robusta, the former tastes smoother and has a richer flavor than the latter. Origins of coffee, Africa. Major producers, Brazil, Vietnam, and Colombia. Non-food use is caffeine. It's medicinal. It's a stimulant. And scientific name, coffee Arabica. Coffee is a drink with a kick, thanks to the large amount of caffeine it contains. This is probably why, at certain times in the long history of the beverage, several attempts were made to ban its consumption. In 1675, Charles II of England not only ordered coffee houses to be closed, but also forbade the selling of coffee, chocolate, sherbet, and tea. OMG. Do you know how many people would probably revolt if you banned selling coffee, chocolate, sherbet, and tea today? Yeah, that's a lot of people. Because if you're not a coffee drinker, there's a lot of people that drink tea. And if you're not a coffee or tea drinker, there's a lot of people who eat chocolate. So that would not fly. The ban, however, was never implemented. I can imagine so. Public pressure forced the king to revoke it just 2 days before it was due to come into effect. Yeah, because you didn't want a revolution. That would have been a sweets revolt. Coffee is the world's most popular beverage with around 2 billion cups drunk every day. The earliest known record of coffee is in the writings of 19th century CE Persian physician Rhazes, 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 who described a beverage named bunchum, an infusion of a fruit called bun with the Ethiopian name for a coffee berry. However, according to one legend, the credit for the discovery should go to a young Ethiopian goat herder called Kaldi. He noticed how, after eating the red berries and shiny leaves of a strange bush, that his goats were so full of energy that they did not want to sleep at night. Some sources say Kaldi took some of the leaves and berries to a local monastery and presented them to the abbot, who concocted a drink from the berries, which he found helped him to keep awake through long hours of evening prayer. So, wait a minute now. A goat herder found the berries, took the berries to the church. The church made a drink. Now you know this is a Sunday sermon, right? The church made a drink that helped the religious folks stay up so they could continue their prayer life. Oh boy. Who's going to preach that message? Coffee, the divine drink for the preachers. By the time Rhazes was writing, coffee was being cultivated in Yemen using plants that Arab traders had brought back from Ethiopia. Right, the deacons can make it through the sermon now. Let's get them a cup of coffee. Which, actually, if you think about it, that's kind of like full circle, because think about how many ministries now have coffee shops in their lobbies. And that's where it began. Look at that. The country's coffee plantations in the mountains at the southwestern tip of the Arabian Peninsula became famous throughout the Muslim world, and the type of coffee was called Arabica. Turkey was introduced to coffee in 1555 by Ozdemir Pasha, the Ottoman governor of Yemen, who brought sackfuls of beans back with him to Istanbul. The Turks originated a new way of preparing coffee. The Turks originated the new way of preparing the coffee. All right? The beans were roasted before being ground into a fine powder, which was then slowly brewed in hot water. By the 17th century, coffee had spread to Europe and North America, although it was the hated tea tax of 1773 that spurred Americans to become a nation of coffee drinkers. So, America may not have had the outburst or the increase of coffee drinkers had the British not taxed the tea, because they were initially tea drinkers. As demand grew, Arabian coffee traders were determined to preserve their monopoly. To ensure that beans could not be germinated to create rival sources of the crop, they parched or boiled them before exporting them so people could not continue to make further crops other places. The Dutch, French, and Portuguese, however, soon found a way around this apparent impasse by illicitly obtaining coffee plants from different sources and transporting them to their respective colonies. So they stole coffee plants because they got tired of them having a monopoly on who could make and produce the coffee itself, the beans itself. All right. Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, and Brazil. Today in Vietnam, most of the coffee produced is the Robusta variety, originally from Central and West Africa. So even during those times, people were in business creating monopolies on products, and the people were like, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to keep doing this. So they stole the coffee plant and got it implanted around the world in other places so that they could stop the monopoly that was going on. Wealth can't wait. Wealth can't wait. We are on pillar number 6, and this is the section of the book talking about how to develop a business that builds wealth. These are the pillars of wealth. They're actually 7. Next week, we're going to spend a lot of time on pillar 7 because some of you are actually doing pillar 7. So I think you'll really enjoy that pillar. Pillar number 6 today, use the 80-20 rule to drill down to the vital few. Use the 80-20 rule to drill down to the vital few. The few things that work fantastically well should be identified, cultivated, nurtured, and multiplied. Richard Koch. 80% of our results, as we have said before, with this 80-20 rule, 80% of our results come from 20% of our efforts. This prolific rule has been applied in numerous contexts for more than 100 years. In 1906, economist, sociologist, and engineer Vilfredo Pareto, which is why it's called the Pareto Principle, discovered that 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the people in his home country of Italy. He came up with the mathematical formula to represent this unequal distribution of wealth while he was gardening. There he noticed that 80% of the peas came from 20% of the pods. The 80-20 rule was born from that level of diverse population and observation, and it persists today. Everywhere you look, you will find applications of the 80-20 rule. 80% of our results come from 20% of our efforts. Later, Dr. Joseph Juran, a quality management guru, applied Pareto's law in business, coining the phrase the vital few and the trivial many. The 20% are the vital and the 80% are the many. He found that 20% of the errors cause 80% of the problems in business, and 20% of the employees cause 80% of the errors in business. If you drill down to the vital few, both good and bad, and take action with that focus, change will come to your life rapidly. The most important rule of business is pillar 1. Client acquisition is king. This is the first place to apply the 80-20 rule. Keller Williams Realty teaches our realtors to touch their database 33 times a year. When realtors analyze their business, they will find that 80% of their business comes from 20% of their clients. Now, I have found that to be true myself in business. And 80% of their clients come from the top 20% of their referral sources. We all have limited time and limited resources to spend cultivating business or cultivating souls, so use it where it counts the most. If a realtor were to have a database of, say, 1,000 potential clients and referral sources, they will not all be treated the same due to this rule. They should prioritize their database and identify the top 20% and touch them more frequently and more personally. Likewise, they can save money by taking the bottom 20% and either cutting them out entirely or keeping contact with them through automation. You can apply this to any business. For instance, Paul was helping his friend who owns a digital media agency. Paul asked him to look through his client database and determine where all his clients came from. And then Paul asked him to start at the top 20 with his clients who regularly use his services, buy more products, pay their bills on time, are nicer to work with, and refer more friends. Then he told him to take his current database and determine where his top quality clients came from. They were able to create a plan of action so that he could continue to attract his target clients. Paul took the agency's top two and bottom two methods for getting new business. The bottom two were tossed out completely. For example, the agency quit doing certain types of online marketing. This method was expensive and yielded few quality clients. Then Paul identified the top two methods of client acquisition, referrals, and seminars that the CEO taught. The agency created a client appreciation program for folks who were referred great clients. And the CEO was more purposeful about doing his seminars, increasing them from 4 per year to once a month. Within 6 months, the agency's business grew by 15%, and that 15% was made up primarily of high quality clients. Just as we use the 80-20 rule in a positive way, it also works in the opposite way. The bottom 20% of clients will cause a disproportionate amount of trouble, headache, and unpaid invoices. Consider dropping these clients to spare yourself the emotional, physical, and financial drain. Not to do list. Good to great author and management guru Jim Collins suggests making a not to do list. This practice is a perfect use of Pareto's law. While you're prioritizing what to do in life, you can also take the time to look at which of your activities are the least productive and eliminate them. A good friend of Paul's who has grown as a businessman to the point where his time is quite valuable was still spending several hours a month sitting with his wife, paying the family bills, and entering them into QuickBooks. This is an activity they both found stressful. Good morning, Lady Judy. This is an activity they both were finding stressful. Realizing that paying bills was an item on his not to do list, he decided to hire a bookkeeper to come to his house and organize his monthly shoebox full of receipts, pay his bills, reconcile his household bank account. Paul's friend freed himself up to spend the time he used that was formerly devoted to bookkeeping to other activities that he could enjoy with his family. So, make your own to do list, but also make your own not to do list. Maybe you will discover it's time for you to hire your own assistant, even if it's part time, or hire a virtual assistant. Now, I think the company is called Fiverr online, and you can hire people as virtual assistants for as little as $5 based on what you need to get done. Just make sure you check their references before you hire them. All right. Paul just sat on a plane with a young lawyer who had left a big firm to go out on his own. The lawyer retained some important clients, but was doing all the work himself with the help of only one secretary. In addition to doing legal work, which he could bill for, he was also doing non billable paralegal work. During their conversation, it became apparent that it was time for the lawyer to hire a paralegal to free himself up to do billable work. This realization would increase his profits while affording him more time for his family. So, think about that rule. Figure out what's going well. What is the 20% of your time, of your life, of your energy, of your activities? What is going well? And think about the bottom 20% of your time. And what are you doing with the bottom 20% of your time every single day? What's working for you? What's not working for you? Eliminate the bottom 20. Focus more on what's going well in the top 20, and you will see change. This is not just my advice, it is a business principle that people use all over the world. All right. For our last read today, we are getting back into the story of Tamar for our Women's History Month segment. And we're talking about the righteous prostitute. We talked yesterday about the financial piece, about how prostitution is seen as often called the world's oldest institution. And we talked about sex trafficking and how sex trafficking drives the demand, and who's behind sex trafficking and who is participating in it, who is requesting women in this manner. And most of the time, the majority of the time, unfortunately, it is men. And we also talked about Hosea 4. Whenever you go and read Hosea 4, God begins to talk about the curse that comes on a people who releases the spirit of whoredoms in their land. And he really begins to address the men in the land. And then he also says, I'm not going to punish your daughters who have been under what you have released on the nation, which is the spirit of whoredoms. So, for all the men out here who are blaming women, I want you to go and read Hosea 4 and see who's actually supposed to take responsibility for the whoredoms that's been released in the land. Because if you aren't requesting it, it won't be offered. I'm gonna take a sip of my orange juice right there. You don't have to say amen, because I know it's the truth. If you aren't requesting it, if you aren't demanding it, there would be no supply. So if you're heartbroken about the women that are being sex trafficked, if you're heartbroken about children coming up missing, if you're heartbroken about all of these thousands and thousands of stories coming out about these networks of human sex trafficking, and when you look at who they're busting in the networks, they're busting lawyers, they're busting doctors, they're busting people in law enforcement, which means there has to be people in places of authority that are either participating in it or they're turning a blind eye and acting like they don't see it. They're arresting pastors as well who are human trafficking, sex trafficking young girls. So if you are upset about it and what is happening, then a part of helping to end it is to deal with the men who are facilitating it. Because again, if there's no demand for it, then the supply line would be cut off. If men would say, we are not going to seek out sexual activity through this means, if men would come together and call a moratorium on going to the strip club, which is one of the many places where women are human trafficked through, if men would call a moratorium on that, not women, men would call a moratorium and say, we're not going to participate in prostitution because we realize the damage that it's doing to women and children worldwide, then we would see a change. But until then, blaming the women is not very helpful. I'm just saying. Just go do the research, see if what I'm saying matches the data of the men that are involved. Take a look at it, do the research, see how many men are leaving our country, they're going to other countries, and they're participating in child prostitution and child pornography. They're buying sex slaves. It's men. Okay? So don't tell me about the women and what the women are doing. I need you to go to the men who are participating and deal with them. Y'all still love me today? All right, I'm gonna keep going. So let me back up. There we go. Prostitution is just one form of abuse that illuminates the enormous power difference between males and females. That differential power is greatest where patriarchal values are in force. Under patriarchy, any power a woman enjoys resides in a male relative who is willing to speak for her and take action for wrongs she has suffered. Even then, the motive is often because the alleged crime violates male honor in the family and has little or nothing to do, many times, with vindicating her rights. Usually, when action is taken because harm has been done to a woman, is usually about defending the honor of the family or defending male honor, not necessarily about defending her rights to not be violated. She has no power of her own, no voice or agency or rights, especially in some of these countries that are not the United States. In the West, a breach of contract similar to what Judah was doing would be reason enough for Tamar, with or without her father's involvement, to haul him into court and to fight for justice. But patriarchy fundamentally deprives women of legal rights and consequently moves justice beyond their reach. Remember, in Genesis 38, Judah is doing her an injustice. He's refusing to give his third son in marriage to her according to the law. He tells her, go back home to your family and live there as a widow. That is not what was supposed to happen. But what was her other alternative or choice? So she went back home and lived with her family as a widow. So Judah was actually shirking his legal responsibility to her. Stories like the one Jesus told about the widow badgering successfully for justice from the unjust judge undoubtedly astonished his hearers, who would find it hard to imagine a just judge, much less an unjust judge, granting a widow, a silent one, a hearing, or to acknowledge that she had any legal rights. The story wouldn't have had nearly the same impact if the plaintiff had been a male. The ironic fact about prostitution is that in a strange way, it simultaneously exploits and inverts the power dynamic between men and women. Patriarchy empowers and privileges men and renders the women powerless. Prostitution is one of the many ways that men use their power and privilege to exploit and abuse women. At the same time, the very men who feel empowered over women by pornography or prostitution are proving themselves to be weak and powerless to women, a fact reinforced by the sexual addiction that ultimately overcomes and dominates them. And because of this sexual addiction that overcomes certain men who are involved in this, some of them do get taken advantage of while they're trying to take advantage of and exploit women. So when I see a man come out and say, I was involved in taking and buying a stripper, I was involved in paying her to do lap dances, and then I took her home with me, and then she drugged me and robbed me, understand that that happened as a result of you participating in taking advantage of her as well. Okay? Because there's some stories going around where the guy is like, woe is me, I'm the victim here. No, you were participating in a system that was already victimizing the person, and they just chose to victimize you right back while you were in the process of victimizing them. So you both were users. Okay? You're both wrong. You're both wrong. You were both wrong. All right? Thankfully, many men are in the battle with women to end sex trafficking, pornography, and all other forms of violence against women and girls. Shout out to the men who are standing up to end violence against women and girls and young boys, and sometimes men who are caught up in these systems. There's an organization that I support. You can check it out. It's a21.org, A, capital letter A, 21.org. And they are in the consistent fight, both here in the United States and abroad, to end human child sex trafficking. They've actually been in on some of the busts, and your contributions to that organization actually helps them to find housing for women who are coming out of the sex industry to get back on their feet and to become free from becoming somebody's sexual slave. The fact remains, and Judah is an example, that in some men, unbridled sexual passion is a self destructive weakness where women unknowingly prevail. Turns out, in Tamar's case, prostitution was the one way she could overcome the man who wielded total power over her life otherwise. She ran a terrible risk that came with a lot of what ifs if her plan went the wrong way. What if he avoided her and someone else approached him? What if he saw through her disguise? What if her scheme backfired and she was discovered? What if nothing actually came from this and she failed at her objective? What was she doing to herself? What is clear from Tamar's actions is that reckless impulsiveness was not part of her plan. She had considered all of the what ifs and taken measures to protect herself. How do we know she took measures to protect herself? Because she required his staff and his seal as identification in case something went wrong. Tamar didn't pose as a prostitute because she was looking for a new career. She wasn't doing this because in her heart of hearts she was a temptress, nor were her actions payback for a father-in-law who had lied to her. Family honor compelled Tamar to act, coupled with a determination to right a legal wrong. For her own honor was at stake. Family duty to her dead husband was being ignored. She had only one objective in mind and was willing to risk her life in order to achieve it. In fact, it is fair to say that a good measure of desperation drove her to accomplish her goal through such unorthodox means. Suddenly, Judah's once passive daughter in law summoned the courage and took matters into her own hands. To grasp the terrifying danger of her mission, only imagine what fate awaits the young woman in today's Middle East who gets pregnant from prostitution. Tamar and Judah the John. Another extraordinary irony of the Tamar Judah story is the one sided bias that heaps all this criticism on Tamar and not a lot, if any, on Judah. Judah is one of the leading lights in biblical history. Despite Joseph's prominence, Judah's legacy will ultimately surpass his younger brothers. For Judah is the father of Israel's leading tribe and the line that carries forward the promises that God gave to Abraham. Judah's name appears in lights in the genealogies of King David and then again in the genealogy of Jesus. As already noted, judgments of Judah's daughter in law are not so forgiving. If you mention the name Tamar, eyebrows automatically go up. It happens again and again with the so called vixens of the Bible. In my book, Lost Women of the Bible, I observe the belief that there's a temptress seemingly inside any woman, and it leaps out into the open. As soon as anything of a sexual nature occurs, the woman involved becomes a prime suspect. She bears more of the blame and carries the guilt a whole lot longer than the man involved. It's disheartening to see just how unredemptive and one sided our memories can be. Up to this point in the story, Tamar accepted the passive role that patriarchy had expected of her. Remember, it was expected of her to deal with the shame of not being able to bear a child as of yet, to have two husbands pass away, and possibly be blamed for their death, and then told, well, go back home to your family as a widow and live as a widow. And then when my youngest son grows up, I'll give him over to you in marriage. And she waits for years and it doesn't happen. All right. So she was taken as a wife to Er, then she was passed on to Onan, and then finally sent home to wait for Shelah. Now, however, Tamar commands the action in the story. She knows her duty to the family and to her deceased husband. The shame of Tamar's childlessness will be intensified if her husband's name dies out. Culturally, she is honor bound to fulfill this duty, and Judah is the only thing standing in her way. In a decisive move, she sheds her widow's garments and her passivity. She disguises herself as a prostitute and stations herself in Judah's path. Tamar's actions must be qualified by three important facts. First, number one, Judah himself has become a widower and is emerging from a season of grief. Tamar's actions will not dishonor or wrong his wife because he is a widow. Secondly, with respect to Levite practices, ancient Hittite and Assyrian laws indicate that if a brother refused or didn't exist to produce a son to perpetuate his deceased brother's name, responsibility to marry the deceased widow fell to the dead brother's father. So now Judah is refusing to hand over his third son. So the only other option legally is to marry the father. So although technically fathering a child by his daughter-in-law was against Judah's will, it was actually a valid legal option. And third, and most remarkable, is Tamar's confidence that Judah will fall for her scheme. It is an indictment of Judah's own character and evidence of how far this son of Jacob has fallen, that she knew him to be that sort of man. A possible contributing factor on that particular night is the fact that Judah had been partying, eating and drinking at the sheep shearing. The alcohol level in his bloodstream may have heightened his gullibility. It is also entirely possible that his failure to recognize Tamar is a reminder of just how little she mattered to the family, evidence of the fact that he really did not know her at all. Predictably, Judah takes the bait. He approaches the mysterious prostitute and the negotiation begins. He doesn't have any money, so he promises to send her a goat in exchange for her sexual services. Like a shrewd, tough-minded businesswoman, Tamar demands a pledge and drives a hard bargain, obtaining his seal and staff as security. In today's world, that is roughly the equivalent of a man's ID, as we said earlier, his driver's license or his passport, and his credit card. If Tamar becomes pregnant, which she does, she won't require a paternity test to prove Judah is the father of her child. Wonder where, who is that? Jerry Springer, Maury Povich, you are the father. It's a biblical story, people. Later, Judah sends his Canaanite friend Hirah back with the promised goat and to retrieve his belongings. but the prostitute is nowhere to be found. No one in the area has seen or knows anything about a shrine prostitute. Judah fears becoming a laughingstock, so he chooses to drop the matter. But he has a whole lot more to fear than laughter. Hard as is to believe, Judah has not hit rock bottom yet. True, his altitude is even lower than it was at the beginning of Tamar's story. Right now, we only know him as a hardened man capable of murder, a callous human trafficker, instigator of a felony, a man who knows how to cover his tracks at the cost of deceiving and devastating his elderly father. Remember, Judah has a history of covering his tracks, except this time, he's not going to be able to cover his tracks. Now he has added John to his resume. Although his second son, Onan, willfully spilled his seed on the ground, Judah was reckless with his by soliciting a prostitute. He exhibited no sense that as a covenant grandson of Abraham, his duty before God in potentially fathering children was a sacred one. But his descent won't stop until he was forced to look in the mirror and see the kind of man that he had become. And the person brave enough to hold that mirror up will be his daughter-in-law, a very pregnant Tamar. Tamar's story reaches a hair-raising climax when someone reports to Judah that his daughter-in-law is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant. So, somebody came to Judah, he heard it through the grapevine, that his daughter-in-law, who's supposed to be sitting over at her her father's home, being the good little widow, is not the good little widow. He has now found out that she has committed the act of prostitution and she has gotten pregnant. Somebody runs this news by him. Judah's response is immediate and abrupt, instantaneous and horrific. Bring her out and have her burned to death. The double standard in his response is breathtaking. He condemns her for a crime that he too has committed. Yet, it is in his power, and he is determined to carry out her sentence of punishment. Now, at last, he can finally rid himself of Tamar, because she's been trouble this whole time. As long as Tamar is sitting over there as a widow in her father's house, she is still a dilemma. All right? He still has a legal responsibility to do right by her, and he hasn't done it yet. So now he hears that she has committed this sin and she is pregnant. So now she has proof of the sin that she committed. Let's get rid of her altogether. I know we think this is like never happened in history, but clearly this stuff is still going on in 2019. This is when Tamar presents Judah with irrefutable evidence that he is the man by whom she is pregnant. She shows him his seal and staff, the mirror that confronts Judah with his own reflection. As Nathan told David, "You are the man." You are the man, David. You are the man, Judah. In case you guys didn't see that generational tie there. In a recent radio interview, I was one of two guests discussing Tamar from the perspective of my book. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't dislodge the other guest from believing Tamar was a vixen. The word prostitute was hung around her neck. Strangely, Judah doesn't see her that way. His words about Tamar are unexpected. English translators have nuanced the wording in our Bibles to, "She is more righteous than I." It gives the impression that Judah is suggesting they are both righteous. The difference between them is only a matter of degree. In his opinion, her righteousness score is a bit higher than his, when on the surface, at least to the uninformed Western eye, both are guilty of profound unrighteousness. She for playing the prostitute, and he for soliciting her services. She is more righteous than I sounds like spiritual mumbo jumbo or a clumsy attempt at dodging the truth about himself. That interpretation fits the Judah we have known all along, when actually his words are an emphatic vindication of Tamar and condemnation of himself. Clearer translations render Judah's words like this. Here's a true translation of what Judah actually said as we close today. She is righteous, not I. Or, she is righteous, I am not. But of course, Western translators are not going to put that in there. The word righteous is the defining word in Tamar's story, eclipsing the label prostitute. This vindication of Tamar comes from the lips of her hardened father-in-law. It is one of the most powerful moments in all of Scripture when the prodigal takes an honest look at himself and comes to his senses. You know we're going to continue this next week, right? Next week, we're going to talk about Tamar, the Ezer warrior, and what we can learn and what we can take away from Tamar's life. And then we're going to talk about Rahab, the other harlot. Listen, this has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host today, Shantae Charles. I hope that I've said something today to get you thinking, to get you reading, to get you researching, to get you eating pistachios and drinking coffee. I hope that you have a great and wonderful weekend. You can tune in Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via Periscope. We will be on Periscope on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Pastor Robert will be completing his series, I believe, where he'll be speaking with you about what God has shared with him for his series. So you can join us Sunday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness, so please go out and be light. If you want to have a comment, you can do so now. I wanted to just make sure that those who have to get off of the broadcast today, you are free to go. If you want to stay for our after talk, you can join us. So, who has a comment or a question? Lady Evelyn, Deacon Henry, Prophet Jonathan, Lady Barbara, anyone else in my chat box that I missed? If you have a comment, please feel free to tap in so that we can hear you on today. I'll give it another minute or so. It's okay, Deacon Henry. If you have anything, any comment to share about what we've been reading on tomorrow, it doesn't have to necessarily be from today's reading, but if you have something you want to share, feel free to tap the two smiley faces and we will add you in. I don't know if Lady Latoya is still on there, but I know she said she had something on Onan. On Onan. All right. Well, if there are no comments today, we will sign off. Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention. Take care, and God bless.